Thank you very much, Raj, for the introduction. I sort of want to switch gears a little bit. This is going to be a very brief talk. I want to keep it physician-centric and discuss, really how cardiology has gotten to where it is and the hurdles that we need to overcome to sort of get to the next step when it comes to doing better from the standpoint of patient care. So to know where we're going, we have to know our history. So obviously, cardiology has had a lot of success. And really, from the standpoint of cardiovascular disease, we've seen, as everyone knows, that there's been a decline in the age-adjusted death rate over time. There's been a lot of different contributing factors towards this. A study by Earl Ford and his colleagues at the CDC really looked at why this is the case, and they used a previously validated statistical model called the impact model, which is one of many models that are used to look at epidemiologic data. And they used that to examine contributions to the lower mortality rate from the 1980s to the 2000s. This model's been utilized in a number of different studies. It's used to analyze trends in both developed and developing countries, so it's fairly sound. So if you look at contributing factors, and you may or may not have an easy time taking a look at the screen there, you can really attribute it to two different things that we've done right as cardiologists. So one of those things is evidence-based therapies, and evidence-based therapies, according to this CDC data, has accounted for about 47% of the decline in cardiovascular mortality. You can see the individual components of those there. A lot of these things are really the cornerstones of cardiology practice: CAD, revascularization and care, initial treatments for acute MI, ACS, heart failure treatments, revascularization for chronic angina, and then, of course, other things. But in addition to all the things that we do in medicine, we also have a reduction of risk factors, which has very much contributed to this decline in mortality as well. And those are all things we know well: cholesterol treatment, systolic blood pressure treatment, tobacco use and preventing that, physical inactivity, and of course there is the unexplained or remaining factors. So this is by no means comprehensive, but as you know, there have been a number of things in cardiology that have brought us here. The Framingham Heart Study in the 60s, first PCI in the 70s, and then of course later adoption in the 80s and 90s to what it is today. The development of guidelines and adherence to those guidelines and actually utilizing them for patient care. And you can see all the way here into 2015 an example with the SPRINT trial where we're looking at intensive blood pressure control. But so how was this all done? These are all things that have sort of led to this, is the obviously progress in scientific knowledge. We've had drug discovery, we've had procedural advances, and we really optimized implementation. That's something to be noted. We've also very much unified the medical profession during this time point, and we've had a lot in terms of public health campaigns to get people on board with this. And I think all of this together has sort of comprised medical research and innovation as we know it today. Now here's the disturbing thing. It appears based on the data, especially from the 2000s onwards, that we've had a deceleration of this trend. And essentially we've had a leveling off of these changes in mortality rate. So looking at the estimated annual percentage change in mortality from into the 2000s, we see that for younger individuals, we're sort of not really quite getting the same rate of decline in mortality that we used to have. And looking at the most recent data in the last several years, from 2011 to 2014, we've seen that studies demonstrate a continued substantial slowing in the rate of mortality among both sexes and all race and ethnic groups. Trying to tease this out by age is a little challenging because this is newer data, but it is something that is concerning. So the question to me really is, how do we overcome this? Because now, obviously, we've done a great job from evidence-based medicine. We've done a great job from the perspective of prevention and risk reduction to get to where we are. But now we have a slowing. So how do we overcome this? Well, a part of it is that we do have somewhat of an obstructionist culture. And that's something that I think a lot of individuals have a lot of opinions on. But part of that is an indoctrinated fear of the industry within medicine. And there's concern that or I should say there's fear that research is incentivized or sponsored. But the truth is that by the 90s, investment in medical research by corporate entities surpassed that of the NIH. Further, greater than 85% of the drugs approved by the FDA have arisen solely from research and development within the industry. So, by the late 2000s, there's been a disconnect between research and development within medicine and practical innovation. And some question can be arose as to whether we think the physician skill set has actually stagnated. Is evidence-based medicine enough? Is risk reduction in public health enough? And to further complicate matters, there's the regulatory burden of a complex healthcare environment that's becoming very difficult to navigate. So, moving ahead, in my view, I think as cardiologists, we have two different options. We can press onwards through our usual processes alone, or we can choose to innovate. So I really want to focus on the future and how we got to where we are, and really the formation of our committee. Well, one thing is for sure is, in order to innovate, we need evolution. And innovation is a multifaceted affair. It necessitates collaboration with a number of different industries. So it's not enough to say that we should continue only with a scientific route. So obviously we need to harness the energies of other industries. So computer science, especially with how much it's grown in the last 15 to 20 years. Engineering, from the perspective of wearables and remote monitoring. The government, I think that's something that hasn't really been underscored just yet. Legislation is very important to actually translating these technologies into something that we can use. The tech industry, which is sort of the reason we're here today, financial structures, manufacturing, etc. This is something very that needs to be looked into in order to really move things ahead. Within the traditional academic research realm, I think novel methods are important, particularly genomics and the precision medicine initiative are one of those things. And underlying or overlying these things is the importance of cardiology and cardiologists to be involved. And I really think that in order for us to move ahead, that cardiologist involvement is absolutely mandatory. So one of the ways that we can do this and really bridge that gap, or I should say make the next jump to help not only reduce mortality but also morbidity, is to harness digital health. And digital health has a number of different realms, things that we're here to talk about today. But really the goal with these digital health ways to sort of move ahead, we have an evidence-based approach to using digital information. We need to do better in terms of modeling health outcomes. We can deliver health information, and basically you can see the list there. There is ways that we can sort of overcome and take the next step in reducing the cardiovascular burden of illness. But there's challenges in the digital space. Essentially, we have a lack of interconnectivity between devices. Products have failed in many cases to deliver in real-world settings. An evidence base is still needed, and at some point, we need to do better in terms of getting that out there, established, and part of the standard. And implementation remains a significant challenge because there's many barriers. And most importantly, the tech industry and healthcare profession are disconnected. So a really good quote I saw is that tech development shows a lack of focus on the place where healthcare takes place. And some of that's been alluded to today earlier. Further, apps don't really address issues in a comprehensive way. So this kind of led to the formation of this tech committee. I think a number of us, myself, Raj, and Seema, were sort of thinking along the same lines. And we realized that the ACC needed a committee that sort of helped try to not only bring these technologies to more awareness, but to also make them more integrated in physicians' everyday lives. With the California ACC, I certainly want to thank Norm Lepper, Liana, and Garwood, who've been excellent in terms of recognizing this interest and realizing that what we're doing is absolutely needed within the ACC. Now, what's interesting is the National ACC is about at the same time has been interested in this as well and held their first cardiovascular innovation summit at the Heart House in September of last year. This was co-chaired by Dr. Rumsfeld as well as Dr. Krummels. And really, out of the meeting, the conclusions were that we need to continue to identify challenges, utilize the ACC's existing infrastructure, bridge partnerships, and very importantly, as clinicians, we're not just improving healthcare, we're really trying to improve health. So it really should be centered on patients. Raj Seema and I discussed this in an article and reviews, and essentially what we want this tech committee to be is a way to catalyze innovation. We want to foster relationships between physicians, academics, and the industry, and really bring together practitioners and technology leaders so that we can start to not only develop these solutions, but also implement them in cardiovascular medicine. And we feel that being in California, we're uniquely positioned to actually facilitate this more so than other states. So in conclusion, the California ACC is basically, we want to be your link to health technology innovation and this level of cross-collaboration that we haven't previously seen among cardiologists. We want your ideas and involvement. We feel that, I should say that we're most interested in being the committee that is willing to evolve to incorporate our membership's interests. And we really feel that with that, we can be the future of cardiology. So, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, one event can change your whole view. So we really hope that this is the event that sort of spurs on that movement. So if there's any questions or comments, you always feel free to email me, just firstname.lastname@gmail. Last name ends in AR. Alternatively, my alumni account, RVT, that's rvt@georgetown.edu. We're always willing to hear about how we can make things better for you. And that's all. Thanks.